Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everybody to Rhyme and Reason. And I am very, very happy, excited for the roles to be switched this time. I'm going to be asking Belal Khan the questions today. Alhamdulillah. I'm very happy to have Belal Khan with us. Belal, for those of you who know Belal, he's been a long-time friend of mine. And we've worked on a lot of projects together. And today I'm going to be able to pick his brain specifically with regards to storytelling and a lot of the different things that we get to as tangents. Today, inshallah ta'ala, it's actually going to be the meat of the discussion. And that's what we'll be looking forward to. Assalamu alaikum, Belal. Welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam.
So,
and welcome to the quarantine COVID edition.
Yeah, we're actually, we're far away from each other. We're in the same room.
More than 6 feet, as you can see.
Can they see us? Is there a wide shot?
Well, that's a wide shot, and that's a wide shot, and so...
Okay.
Yeah.
So
watch. Extend your hand out. Like, yeah, it's not happening.
Yeah, we're pretty far away. Alhamdulillah. So what's going on, man? How's COVID been for you?
COVID sucks.
It's been miserable, huh?
Yeah, horrible.
You know? Alhamdulillah. Some people, it's introverts. For them, COVID has been
They're
like...
thriving, man. This
they
is like an
are
introvert's
having a
dream.
wonderful
it's my
time.
nightmare.
But this is your nightmare.
It's my absolute nightmare. I mean, it's a number of things, right? Like, here's the thing. I need my peace and quiet and alone time to get work done.
Yes.
Right? I don't have that at home because...
Can't go anywhere.
I can't go anywhere, right? Now, my apartment complex has a business center and has a lounge and all that, but the complex itself is shut down.
Everything's... Yeah,
Yeah,
so you can't
I can't get my focus time.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't that, I'd go to Starbucks.
Yep.
I can't go... Like, the closest thing available is Chipotle, and Chipotle is not a work...
It's not a working spot.
Yeah, it's not a working spot at all. Now, there's a lot of great outdoor spots, but it's Houston. The only time Houston is good outdoors is
uninhabitable. Yeah. That's rough, man. That's rough.
So, yeah, it's just like what ends up happening is I end up becoming like working from like 6 p.m. to like 2 a.m.
When you have some sort of peace and quiet.
Yeah, like around 8 o'clock, the baby goes to sleep, but like 4 to 6 or so, or 4 to 8, the wife is taking care of the kid. And so then I can kind of focus. But then it's just like, I'm still, like I didn't get the opportunity to step away from where I've been all day. Yeah. It's like I'm just moving into the next room. And so mentally, I'm still scrambled.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is...
And work from home is not that easy. I mean, it's kind of hard.
It's easy when people are not home.
Yeah, and even then, it's that separation is really important.
Yeah,
and that's why they talk about, even for example, dressing like you're going to work, even though you're at home, just so that you can have that mental shift.
Yeah,
not being in your pajamas, and of course, family sometimes. Like when I'm at my mom's house, she does not care about this work from home business.
Of course
at all.
not.
She does not care. She's like, Ammar, we want to go visit your uncle. So I'm like, Mom, I got like, she's like, oh, you're working? Is this work? Like, this is how you work? I'm like, yes, with my laptop. That's about it. Alhamdulillah. So, the introverts have been thriving and
not only are they thriving, I see them getting healthier and fitter.
Yes, they're losing weight and all of that type of stuff. If anything, they're just bothered by the extra people that are at the house all the time now, right? So now their house that they had alone before is a little bit shit.
Yeah.
But it's important to note that extroverts such as yourself, they're being
tested.
They're being tested, and it's okay if you're an extrovert. There are Bilals all over the world who are in this with you, and they're going through it with you as well. So you have some sort of solace there. How has it affected you were very out and about before, cycling, Jiu-Jitsu.
So yeah, last week I got on my bike and I did like 6 or 7 laps around the complex. And I was thinking to myself, how did I manage to ride my bike from Houston to San Antonio? I mean, not San Antonio, to Austin.
And how many miles is that?
That was 150 miles.
You did that over 2 days?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
now 6 and 7 laps around your complex was too much.
I think it was a combination of the fact that I started the ride only after a small warm-up in the middle of the day where the sun is at its most brutal.
That's the worst.
And whereas when I was doing my
That's when I went to the cave of Hira in Mecca after Jum'ah. Dumbest idea. After Jum'ah. We're like, let's go try to climb this mountain. Sun was beating down on us.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
It was just hot and it's like I feel my skin burning.
Yep.
right? And it's not even like you're moving and the air cools you down. No, it's like a blow dryer, like a hot blow dryer in your face, and you just like you feel your skin is just like. And the only time I was experiencing that on my ride, I think it was also had to do with the fact that I did the ride in April and not in like July or August or September.
Have you found a new normal?
No,
Not yet.
not yet. There's no. Here's the thing, right? It's always emotionally challenging when you go through one or two major life changes, right?
You had the new baby arrive.
So in
Yusuf.
this case, we moved into our apartment, and literally the next day we went to deliver the baby.
MashaAllah.
Right? And so 4 or 5 days later, I don't know how many it was, we come back to an apartment that is completely like, it's been 8 months and we're still moving in.
Yeah, MashaAllah.
Right?
MashaAllah.
and it's like every month the baby is also like, there's new stuff coming in for the baby.
Yep.
And it's like, so new apartment, new baby, coupled with the fact that before the baby and all that, wife would go to work, right? For at least 8 hours, I could do my thing. Now wife is home all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
So
all of these changes, and I remember it was challenging when one of the jobs that my wife had was also work from home. So we turned the dining area into like a cubicle office, split two ways. One side is I'm working, the other side she's working.
Okay.
And when she finally got a different job where she would commute to, I was very happy because now I got the whole.
You need your space. Yeah.
Yeah, I needed the space to work, and because part of it is like when I work, I kind of take over the space, but like I can't even do that anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like if I'm on a meeting, for example. Like I gotta pace, I gotta walk. I ain't walking outside.
Bro, everybody's going through it, man. Everybody's going through it. Everything got shrinked to your living space.
I feel claustrophobic.
A lot of people do. Yeah. A lot of people do. And I think that's why like it's just like here in Texas, you have so much interest in just coming back to any sort of normalcy. Like people just running out trying to find groups again.
Bro, I've never seen so many people at the park working out.
Yeah, when you go to the park, you find so many people working out here. Your jiu-jitsu teams, they've been training.
So here's the thing, I gotta hand it to them as admiration to the folks over at Gracie Baja.
Yeah.
All right. At least the impression that I've been seeing while experiencing a lot of FOMO, right? As they continue.
That's feeling of missing out for everybody.
Yeah, the feeling of missing out or the fear of missing out. Obviously, they got a business to run, so they're gonna stay open while maintaining, the legal guidelines that they have to follow as a business and as a gym, X certain percentage of people, whatever, right? But these guys, they're going to go get tested every 2 weeks as a team. So far, nobody's come back positive.
Nice. Inshallah.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking to myself, and I was listening to a podcast about.
They go together to get tested.
That's the impression that I'm getting.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure not everybody goes together, but at least the image that's being put out there is the fact that they're taking this stuff seriously, but they're also continuing with life.
Yeah.
And so, but they're taking all the appropriate precautions to make sure that everybody's continuously getting tested and whatnot, which I think is great. And I'm considering getting on that bandwagon.
Getting back in.
Yeah. And but it just comes down to a negotiation with the family that you're living with. Yeah. It's like,
is this worth it?
It's like I don't have my jiu-jitsu, barely working out. It's like, and even going to the gym on the regular. I think is one of the mistakes that I made. So I've always been of the idea that the gym should be walking distance from where you live, right? So there's a fitness connection literally across the street. I made the mistake of thinking I'm going to have the same behavior patterns, but when life changes come, those behavior patterns end up changing as well. Fitness connection closes at 8 o'clock at night. And that's like if I were to go to the gym in the
What is
evening.
Fitness Connection? Is that a gym?
Is that
a chain?
They're like a 24-hour fitness.
Okay.
But they're exclusively in Texas, I believe.
Okay.
Right? And they have like 25 locations. Yeah. $10 a month, you get access to everything.
Wow, that's pretty
right?
good.
It's great, right? That's why I got it. It was like it's significantly cheaper. They have everything. COVID hits, they're closed.
Do they have a pool?
They have everything.
I'm gonna have to look these guys up.
Yeah, I mean they're across the street from me, right? I don't know if they're near you or not, but the only problem is that, again, it comes down to I either go early morning, which is like literally an hour and a half window.
Yeah.
And if I miss that, then I can't go.
Yeah.
Right, because they close at 8, and at 8 o'clock is when
And you're
the
taking
baby...
care of the baby also. It's not just your wife. You've
Right.
got your own.
We take turns. We have shifts essentially.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'm thinking about is maybe I should literally cancel my Fitness Connection membership and go back to 24.
Because it's 24 hours.
Yeah, it's 24 hours.
So let me just back up a little bit and give a rundown, because I didn't even introduce Belal other than assuming that people know him. But if they don't know Belal has been background in marketing, background in storytelling for a very long time.
Best way to put it, marketing by profession, media by passion.
Okay, perfect. See, you can tell he's a marketer. He's got his own slogans and everything like that, alhamdulillah. And his imprint on our communities has been long, alhamdulillah. Very involved in a lot of da'wah behind the scenes and sometimes in front of the camera as well. And he is black belt in Taekwondo.
No.
What is it?
So my black belt officially is in karate.
Okay, so right? Black belt in karate.
So if you ever say I'm a black belt in Taekwondo, that's kind of like a diss.
Oh, really? But if I said a black belt in Kung Fu, would that be a diss?
There's no belt in Kung Fu.
Okay, I'm showing my ignorance here. What other black belt, is there a black belt that would be considered higher?
Okay, so this is a misconception, right? So if you go get a black belt in Taekwondo, it's not that much different from karate in the sense of like what you've accomplished.
But Taekwondo doesn't have the kicks.
No, Taekwondo is like 70% kicks.
Taekwondo is all about the kicks.
It's all about the kicks. Taekwondo as an effective martial arts for self-defense is like not there, right? It's there for like
aggression.
No, it's like gymnastics.
Oh,
right. I'm probably gonna rub a lot of Taekwondo practitioners the wrong way.
Yeah, because you're calling them gymnastics
gymnasts.
People.
Like they are genuine. You gotta understand the context in which this martial art developed. They were farmers that needed the ability to kick oppressors on their horses off of their animals.
So it sounds like it is self-defense then.
Right, for a context, right?
Okay.
But there's no people running around on horses with spears and, right?
I mean, we are in Texas.
When was the last time you saw a horse except for a police officer? And are you going to kick a police officer?
Well, I saw them on the Black Lives Matter protest a couple of months ago.
Okay.
People came in on horses and stuff.
It's a rarity, right?
Okay.
Now, karate, on the other hand, or karate,
however. Oh, mashallah. Mashallah. Okay. First of all,
I find it hilarious when people are like karate, right?
Is that how the Japanese say it, or is that how the French say it?
It was actually, no, it's the Japanese form.
Okay.
The Japanese, so karate was actually a Chinese art that was brought into different Okinawan cities. So depending on what city you learned it from, it was that city, te. So for example, there's a city in Okinawa called Naha. So if you learn karate in Naha, it would be called Nahate. But as a form of unification after the Japanese came and invaded and took over, right? They're like, what the locals would also refer to it as is Chinese hand or Chinese boxing. And the Japanese like, we're not calling this thing Chinese. So we're just gonna call it open hand technique, right? Or basically boxing technique, but obviously it had both hands, feet, grappling, all of that built into it. But the thing was the Japanese wanted to own it, but also disempower the people that they kind of invaded. And so they wanted to turn it into a sport, and the Japanese had their own style, which was Jiu-Jitsu, right? But I'm just kind of...
The Japanese had Jiu-Jitsu first?
Jiu-Jitsu is a Japanese art.
And then it got to Brazil somehow?
So the Japanese, when the samurai fell, and the Japanese as a national effort were moving towards westernization, what they had to do was, so one of the Jiu-Jitsu practitioners, his name was Jigoro Kano. He wanted to essentially unify it in a way that was more or less, I guess, acceptable to the West. It was their contribution to the West, essentially. And so they formulated it, and instead of it being Jiu-Jitsu, which was the soft technique, with every school doing their own thing, They're like, let's just unify it, call it Judo, which is the way of gentleness. Right? And so their whole thing was, we're going to be entering the Olympics.
And Judo is all about throws, isn't it?
So that's what it is now. But Judo was Jiu-Jitsu, but civilian form. Right? You got to understand that Japan used to be warring tribal states. Every tribe, every school, they would have rivalries, man. They would kill each other just to say we're more superior in our technique and ability.
Sounds pretty tribal.
As a means of doing away with that, their move towards westernization and the removal of the feudal caste system, the samurai were on top of that. That's when the samurai fell. And so, in fact, people were like, why are you trying to be samurai? Like, there's no caste system anymore. And that's the thing that people don't realize, is that they romanticize this medieval Japanese culture of samurai and whatnot, but it is essentially a caste system, right? Even just like in India, they have the Hindu caste system, which a lot of even Muslims tend to adopt on a social level. But in the Hindu
How do they adopt it on a social level?
So when I went for Hajj, right, I didn't even understand it until somebody explained it to me. I think it was my second to last day in Mecca before we're gonna go back to the US. And I'm sitting next to this dude, and he's like, where you from? I'm like, I'm coming from the US. He's like, I don't believe you. You don't look like somebody from the US. And I'm like, what do you want, right? And it's like, where are you originally from? And I'm like, I'm talking to a white person here. He's a Desi kid, right? And I'm like, well, yes, I was born in India, but like I was less than 2 years old before I came to the US. He's like, oh, you're from India, and like, what's your last name? Like, last name is Khan. He's like, oh, you're a Khan. You should be proud of being a Khan. I'm like, what's so proud of it? You mean like because of the ancestry going back to the Mongols? Like, he's like, no, because they're the best caste, or next best after Sayyids or something, right? I'm like, first of all, there's no caste system in Islam. It's like, of course there is. it's like you should be proud of your caste. And
so is this guy from India itself?
I don't know where he was from. I think he was from India or Pakistan. He was Desi. And I was just like, well, what's this guy's deal? And essentially what was explained to me was that the caste system had been so influential as a social order that when Hindus became Muslim, some of them adopted that, right? It's understood that many Rajputs, which were the warrior class, ended up adopting Khans, right? And maybe Brahmins ended up adopting Sayyid, right?
What does adopting mean? They adopt the last name?
Right. Again, it's not consistent throughout geography and whatnot, but this is the alluded understanding. But the thing is, people don't want to let go of their social status.
Of course,
right?
It's natural.
So, yeah, and people will be, and even among Muslims, I hear it more amongst Pakistanis than from Indians. What I hear is like, I'll hear somebody say like, oh, you got to marry so and so from this last name, or so and so from that last name, but we're not going to allow for. But I'm like, but that sounds like a caste thing. And that's when people are like, yeah, well, this is our social order.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you sound like you're Hindus right now.
It's one of the like things that are most difficult to get rid of in society, because if I'm born with a privilege, why would I want to?
Why would you let go of it, right?
Why would I want to let go?
But what's interesting is like this privilege is more psychological than it is material. But it's opportunity that you're.
So the opportunity is material.
Yeah.
Right. What it opens doors, the doors that it opens for me. So back to the Japanese. So somehow they ended up in Brazil.
So what happened was Judo through the Olympics and whatnot was, as a gift from the Japanese, went to so many people. It went to the Russians. It went to Brazil, it went to Europe, it went to Iran.
When you say as a gift, meaning they sent ambassadors and teachers and things like that?
Some schools did. It was all part of the cultural exchange that the Olympics brings. Because Judo was first introduced to the Olympics in the early 1900s, if I'm not mistaken. And with that, people were like, yo, we got to learn this art and compete with them. So you'll find the training methodology of the Russians today versus the Iranians versus the Australians versus the Americans, all of it so that they can compete. Now, when it comes to Olympics, there's a different set of rules and it becomes more about throws and submissions and whatnot. But in fact, Professor Upiano, from Gracie Baja, where we train, he trained in Judo first. And he was explaining how Judo is more popular in Brazil than Jiu-Jitsu, right? Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu developed from Judo in Brazil. But their whole thing was to develop and perfect the ground game. In terms of takedowns and things like that, like just get the person to the ground, pull guard, and work on submitting the person on the floor. And the whole philosophy was, first, technique will always supersede strength. And on top of that, a person with technique that is smaller will always dominate a bigger, stronger person who doesn't have technique.
Is that within reason, though? So,
Yeah,
for
I mean,
example, if a person outweighs you by 30 pounds or 50 pounds...
Again, if a person is untrained, then yes. Now, one of the things that they say is that for every 20 pounds, add a belt.
So it goes white belt, blue belt, right?
Yeah, white, blue, purple, brown, black.
White to blue, purple, brown, black. So every 20 pounds,
yeah,
consider that
consider
person.
That a
they
person
just,
higher belt. Yeah.
Okay.
So you shared this video of Shaq, right?
Yeah, I sent you. Shaq was dominating all of these
Yeah,
jiu-jitsu
it was
guys.
a combination of the fact that this guy's about 350 pounds.
Yeah.
Right? Like I've grappled a 350-pound person. I'll tell you this much: I was sore for a week.
Yeah.
Right? Just the fact that I was putting all my strength behind the...
And Shaq isn't like he's untrained. He's
right. He's an athlete.
But no, he's even trained in martial arts to some degree.
Yeah.
I don't know how much.
And couple that with the whole celebrity shock and awe of being in the presence of somebody.
Like you got Shaq wrestling with you.
Are you going to submit Shaq, even if you could?
Yes, I would. If I could, oh my goodness. Do you know how much smack I would talk? Oh my God.
No, but would you submit him to the point of like risking injury?
No, but I would until he taps, yes.
No, to yourself.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, right? So I think it was a combination of those things where...
And also that he outweighed them by like 100 pounds.
Yeah.
Okay. So did all of these martial arts originate in Japan and in Asia?
No, so look, so there's a fundamental...
And is there a martial art that originates in the Muslim world anywhere?
Okay, so here's the thing. You got to understand, martial arts is not specifically Muslim.
No, it's not even... It's not specifically Muslim.
Every culture and society has had their...
Well, then my question is, which ones have emerged from the Muslim world?
That's the thing. It's hard to say because when you say the Muslim world, are you talking Muslim from the seerah of the Prophet?
No, I'm talking about what is now the Muslim world. Anywhere from Morocco to the West to Southeast Asia.
So here's the thing. Grappling has been a fundamental martial art that is a foundation of anything that you would do, even many times throughout history, a prerequisite for military service.
Yes. Ibn Umar had to wrestle a kid when he was like 13
this is going
just to
ages.
prove that he could participate in the Battle of Badr, and he wasn't able to. And then in Uhud, he was able to. So it's like when you have like a post-pubescent kid, 13, 14, and you want to know, can he join the battle? It's like, here, wrestle these guys.
Yeah. And so like that's something that's historical, right? Going back ages, even probably before recording.
But wrestling, when I think of that type of wrestling, I don't think of any sort of strategy or technique or anything.
Is all technique. Wrestling is your ability to take a person to the ground and hold them there.
But I don't know that they had any sort of training. It was just, whatever your natural ability was to wrestle. It's like us at the masjid.
And that's incorrect though, because if you have any kind of military, you have any kind of art that's involving arms, then there's always going to be technique and stuff that's involving the disarming.
Okay.
And if you disarm somebody, then what do? How do you take them to the ground? There's a technique to that. And biomechanics, we're all human beings. So a lot of similar techniques are going to develop without a doubt, right? In terms of something as simple as an arm drag, single leg or double leg takedown. That exists, even throwing somebody over your shoulder. Almost every style of martial art has something.
I guess when I think of the martial arts, I think of Judo, Jiu-Jitsu, Karate, Taekwondo, all of these, they all seem like they're emerging from the same part of the world.
We know Karate, Kung Fu, Jiu-Jitsu, Judo because of media and sport. Who brought Kung Fu to the Western consciousness?
Kung Fu? Bruce Lee.
as well as all of those movies that followed, right? Who brought karate to the Western consciousness?
Jackie Chan. I don't know. I'm guessing.
Well, I mean, think about it, right?
Okay.
There's two things that
I'm not even sure Bruce Lee brought Kung Fu, to be
but
honest.
Bruce Lee was a major...
Was it Kung Fu that he practiced?
So he brought Wing Chun, right?
Okay.
But he developed his own style, but he was Chinese, right? Or American Chinese, and because he was born here, right? But then he was raised there, but then came back here. China's main martial art was Kung Fu. So you have all these Kung Fu movies. Hong Kong cinema has been around for a while, right? So they've been producing their stuff like with style and art and fantasy and all that. And Americans wanted to see some of that. Within that, you have Bruce Lee, who became a legend. You have Jackie Chan, who's been working even till today, who's getting old now. But then when it comes to karate, you have the U.S. military. And their, and them learning martial arts in Japan, coming back here, coupled with the development of the sport of karate. They had several kinds. They had point-based with the Japanese. They have Kyokushin, which was actually a nationalized Japanese Korean guy.
Hold on, I know the answer to the question now. Ask me again, who made karate popular in the U.S.?
Who made karate popular?
Danny LaRusso.
He was also a big part of it.
The
with
Karate
the Karate
Kid,
Kid
yes.
and Mr. Miyagi.
Yes, Mr.
Right?
Miyagi.
And then in addition to that, now, Judo has been brought to the West, so to speak, because of the Olympics, but Jiu-Jitsu didn't really come into the consciousness until...
Jiu-Jitsu?
Yeah.
UFC.
Exactly. So it's these kinds of things that are part of popular culture that are a vehicle for these arts to come into the consciousness. Now...
but you're saying every region has its own art form.
Yeah, and it's always some sort of derivative of or influence.
Have you heard of anyone that's born out of, for example, India?
Well, India's ancient martial art, which is now kind of being revived, which they say is the source of Kung Fu and all of these other Eastern martial arts, is Kalaripayattu, which is a South Indian form of martial art, which kind of, the British kind of shut it down when they took over, but...
And then you have Muay Thai in Thailand.
Yeah, you have Muay Buran, which was the ancient form, which the actual martial art, and then you have the sport of it, which is Muay Thai. And fun fact, there's no belts in Muay Thai. How do you grow in Muay Thai? You compete. And if you're winning matches, that means you're progressing, essentially.
It's a very sincere thing. There's no...
Yeah, there's no... it's like, you got a belt, okay, great, right? Belts are great. And even belts are a postmodern invention as a means of encouraging people, right? Even a martial art or less martial art, more of a training and conditioning system, Krav Maga, which is the Israeli fighting. I don't want to call it a style because it's more conditioning. What they do, they take techniques and styles from other things with the objective of taking somebody who's untrained and make them combat ready in 2 years because of their
military training.
Yeah, because of their military training. That the whole idea is to get them conditioned and ready to go. But even then, they're not inventing anything new. They're just taking the techniques that are effective in military form, right? You have the civilian form of it that came later, even from the founder, who, when he left his service in the IDF, went in and created a civilian form.
I just heard it was dirty. That's all I've heard about it.
It is dirty fighting.
Yeah.
It's like you cannot use the methodology of Krav Maga in a UFC match. You can't gouge out their eyes. You can't pull their ears. You can't, kick them the balls, right?
Low blow. We call that a low blow.
All of our technique in terms of the pad training that we would do.
Low blow.
Punch him in the face, hit him in the throat, right? That kind of stuff. And all of it was geared towards quick incapacitation, right? Whereas a lot of sports stuff.
Well, it doesn't sound like it's about sport at all. It's
just
just about
sport.
Self-defense, like
it's
street
up,
defense.
Or some might argue self-offense.
Yeah.
Right? It's the Cobra Kai of martial arts. Was it
Sweep the leg, no mercy.
Hard, no mercy.
So shifting to storytelling aspect that we had wanted to start off this session with.
I can go about martial arts all day.
I know. And
fun fact, martial arts is my first love.
And I wanted to talk about it because it is an art, right?
Yeah.
It's an art form, and that's part of why I wanted to discuss it.
That is rooted in technique and discipline and skill.
You know, this brings us back to martial arts, because I do feel like even when we're talking about communities, right? So you were trained as a kid. You're a kid going to the dojo. You're a kid going to sensei.
Yeah.
And it was a very effective pairing to parenting, is to be able to say to an unruly kid, I'm gonna tell sensei.
Yeah. Straight up.
Right?
Yeah.
A lot of parents aren't aware of that. That, you know what, you're taking your son to the Sheikh and Hafiz Saab, and he's going crazy and he's not listening and all of that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Try taking him to sensei and see how that goes. Why is a sensei able to command so much respect from children?
Because it's a number of things. The sensei is not just there to scold you. Sensei is not even gonna beat you.
Yeah.
Sensei is going to have everybody else beat you. An example of sensei doing effective disciplining. So Saturday class, every Saturday, I would do like a double session because dad's business.
How old are you around that time?
I don't know, middle school.
Okay.
Right?
So you're like 10, 11?
Sure. Maybe 12.
Sorry, middle school, 12, 13.
Yeah.
11, 12. Yeah.
I think 13 is high school, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, 10, 11, I was probably in like 6th grade.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe 7th. What I remember is this. So we're in the middle of class, right? One of the students that I know comes in, and sensei is visibly upset. He's just like, and he very vehemently goes, get your sparring gear on, get on the mat. You're going to spar every single person, right? And all of us are looking at like, what did this person do, right? The student gets on the mat, and they spar person 1.
What is the sparring gear? What are they wearing?
Full on your standard.
So they're wearing a helmet?
Yeah, you got your helmet, you got your gloves, you've got your shin pads.
So this is going to be full contact?
Yeah, full contact. Just you've got 2 to 3 minute rounds. 1 minute rest in between. And so round 1, they go, and then round 2.
By round 2, they're exhausted already.
Sure, but like you train, right? Like you train. And this person's been training for years as well.
Okay.
And so my turn comes, couple of strikes in, they're on the floor and they're curled up and they're crying. And sensei is like, don't stop, right? It's
to you.
He's like, what do you want me to do?
He's
Kick
like,
him out there,
no
down?
mercy, sweep the leg. Sweep the leg, Belal.
Finish him. Like, no, I'm like, what do you want me to do? Like, they're on the floor. Like, they're not cooperating, right? They're not. And so sensei basically tells him to get up and go in his office. Now, sensei's office was positioned such that you have the mat, right? And the mat is such that one side is...
This is how many kids later did he fight you, basically, or spar with you?
So I think I was number 2 or 3.
Okay.
Right? But we're in the middle of the class, right? Everybody's warmed up. This person is coming in cold. And so sensei's office has a one-way mirror.
Yeah.
From inside the mat, we see a mirror. Inside his office, he can see inside. And he gets inside. We can hear muffled yelling, and the window is shaking from the way he's yelling, right? So later, it turns out that this student had gotten caught shoplifting in the same complex that the dojo was located.
Yeah.
Now, the store owner called the cops. I think both the police officer and the store owner knew sensei. And the issue wasn't that they got shoplifting, which was bad. The issue was that they were shoplifting with the school uniform on.
Ooh.
Yeah. Right?
It's like, here's my sensei's dojo, by the way, if you wanna call him.
Yeah. And now here's the thing. My sensei has a very strong relationship with law enforcement and police officers. They hold training for them, in grappling, in all of that. And so many officers, in fact, even today, right now, the sheriff of the town trains at his dojo, right? Yeah. And so, that's because it's important for an officer to know how to de-escalate a situation before things kind of go south. But anyway, so police officer and the store owner, they come in, and turns out that they had shoplifted, and sensei was just like, I'm going to discipline you. Like, first of all, it's bad that you shoplifted. Second of all, you had no shame. Yeah. Right? You're doing with your school uniform on, this is not what I teach you. Yeah. And the parents are basically like, good that you did this. Yeah. And the best part is this, as rough as that was, the student kept coming back because the parents kept bringing him back. The child had no choice.
Yeah.
Right? But at the same time, it's such a learning moment for the kid to essentially, grow with.
So, I mean, that's a level of disciplining that a school would never be able to do, right?
This is the thing, bringing it back to COVID. This was, and I think I might have shared this thought with you some weeks ago. So, just like in any kind of Islamic learning and education right now, right? One of the things that AlMaghrib has, or is becoming more and more, less of the in-person experience, more of, here's a class that you can take and you can learn this information, probably better than anyone locally can teach you, right? Same kind of thing exists in Jiu-Jitsu. Some of the best technicians, some of the best practitioners have produced DVDs and produced online courses for specific techniques and movements and strategies for practicing this art. Now, when COVID hit, a lot of people are like, hey, you know what? Let me just go full force into these instructionals and not go to my school. What's interesting is that these guys who are producing these courses, they're like, look, yeah, we might be able to give you some really good information, but knowing the information is one thing. Knowing how that information applies to you, how you can execute it, how you can use it as part of your tool set, only your coach can do that. You can't leave your school and expect to make progress, because your coach is going to know, assuming they're a good coach or they're a good professor or sensei, they're going to take an interest in who you are, your life, what limits you, how to get over those limitations, what your goals are. I just remember as a kid, every other class has to be like, what's your goal? What's your goal for today? What are you working on? You come in here training hard. Why? Right? Always making that clear, or at least having us be clear about it. Right? And I know not every school does that. Not every sensei does that. Not every sensei, professor, teacher is a good teacher. I got lucky. Right?
That brings us to a very important part of storytelling. Right? The hero's journey. Every hero is introduced to a guide. Right? And I want
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yes, or is it Obi-Wan Kenobi? It's whoever it is. And I think this is important because a lot of times, even in the religious realm, or whether you're talking about the sensei, your sensei is basically saying to you, I'm a guide, as opposed to saying, I'm the hero.
Right.
It's very natural and very kind of, because it's your ego, you want to be the hero. And so it's about how these students, for example, will serve you.
Everybody's a hero in their own story. Right?
Everybody's the hero in their own story, but me trying to turn you guys into some sort of like, I guess, minions for my story, right? As opposed to, especially when you're in the station of being a teacher, no matter what it is that you're teaching, that you recognize that you are the guide for these individuals. And so it is about what your goals are. It's not so much about how I can use you to open up more schools for myself, so I wanted you to talk a little bit about that, especially about the importance of storytelling and giving people a little bit of idea what this hero's journey is and why it's so important that people are familiar with it.
Right.
And of course, I don't remember if I had mentioned this, but Belal has studied film, and
just to kind of give a context, I haven't studied film in an official capacity. Right?
In an unofficial capacity, you've finished an entire curriculum.
Right. So I went to school, Montclair State University, initially as an economics major, realized I did not want to do bond trading, which was why I was getting an economics major. So then I ended up kind of exploring my options. And then finally I was just like, hey, you know what? I looked at broadcasting, I looked at film, I looked at journalism. In the end, the closest or the fastest path to finishing school was to go back to business school, but instead of an economics major was to pick marketing. But I really wanted to understand media, right? Less from a marketing perspective, more from a storytelling and emotional perspective. And this was a quote from Steven Spielberg where he says something along the lines of, it's not about what looks good on camera, but it's about understanding the emotional mechanics that make what's on camera work, right? It's all in the writing. And so that's why I was like, hey, I want to check out the film school. Now, the issue was the film department and the film school, although the same university, is a different school altogether. So I'm just like, hey, can I attend all your film classes for free without credit? And they're like, yeah, we'd love to have a business student in our classes. And so I was going to school part-time, taking 1, maybe 2 classes a semester, working full-time, and on my free time, I just attend all the film classes. By the time I graduated, which was 7.5 years later, I had gone through the entire film curriculum twice over.
Twice?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And more, right? Because I ended up going to LA several times to take seminars and programs, meet people, and just kind of get a better understanding of how this also applies to marketing and whatnot. Initially, at the time, my dream was I'd go work in marketing and entertainment.
So if you could just share the important elements of a hero's journey.
So every story has essentially 3, maybe 4 parts. You can look at it as a 3-act structure.
Every movie you've ever watched?
Every movie you ever watch is going to have a 3-act structure. In fact, no producer is ever going to even consider a film if it doesn't have a 3-act structure, right? Okay. The 3-act is basically you introduce the characters of the story, the good guy, the bad guy, something that the good guy does as good, something the bad guy does as bad to establish them as good guy, bad guy. It clarifies for the viewer what the story is about, not just on an emotional level, but also from a genre perspective.
Okay.
Right? And it also clearly lays out what the finish line of the movie is.
What the goal is.
Right. Is it to stop something, escape from something, to achieve something, to get something, right? All of that is established in the first act, usually within 10 minutes, sometimes as long as 25 minutes. Okay? This is where you also get introduced to your call to adventure, if you want to call it, right? Okay. Act 2, which is the major chunk of the movie, there's a part 1 of Act 2 and a part 2 of Act 2. Part 1 of Act 2 is all about this new world that you're in. There was a call to adventure, you accepted it. All right? Now you're being introduced to this whole new world. What are the rules of this world? What makes this world great and different from what the thing was normally? This is all the stuff that's in the trailer, right?
Okay.
And then part 2 of Act 2 is all about the bad guys closing in, right? Now that you understand this world, the bad guys have noticed you, right? And now they're coming after you. And they come after you so well that there's going to be a moment where everything is lost.
Okay.
Right? And then the hero of the story, or the heroes, they find the solution to the bigger problem that emotionally, or rather the solution to the plot is actually the solution to their personal problem. Once they can solve what their personal problem is, they will have the solution to the plot problem. Whether it's
there's always some sort of personal issue?
Yeah. If a story does not have something personal, if there's no hero's journey, because the hero's journey is less the plot. So
you're saying if there's no personal issue?
Yeah, if there's no character journey, then all it is just...
So give me like the most famous movie ever where we go through this hero's journey. Something.
Star Wars, for example. But you probably haven't seen Star Wars.
No, okay. Right? But I understand that there's a Luke Skywalker and there's an Obi-Wan.
There's a Luke Skywalker.
Kenobi.
Yeah, it's Obi-Wan Kenobi who basically tells him, like, look, you know, you're special, you have the Force. Harry Potter does this too.
Okay.
Right? You're a wizard, Harry. Right?
Yeah. Harry's old world is he's living in the
basement or some under the
staircase.
Cupboard, under the staircase.
Okay.
Every story, Home Alone. This is a classic example.
Okay.
Home Alone, Kevin McAllister. You see his regular family. You see his family crowded home that he's living in.
Okay.
And especially in his case, the call to adventure is he gets to live home alone.
Yeah.
Heck, what the plot is in the title.
Home Alone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But the real character journey is...
He realizes that he loves his family.
Yeah. Right? And he just needed a break from them, that's all.
Yeah.
And the plot also is that he's home alone, there's people that are trying to rob his place. Or rob the neighborhood, right? So that's where the interesting conflict comes into play.
So according to you, those evil guys would have been introduced in Home Alone within the first 15 minutes.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. Or in the first act, however long that 15. Usually, older movies, the first act is about 25 minutes.
Okay.
Newer movies, the first act is about 10 minutes.
Okay. And so in Star Wars, Darth Vader would have been introduced within the first 20, 25 minutes as well. So this is something that a person could look out for. What is this hero's journey? How is it important for us in Dawah to understand?
I mean, you got to understand
storytelling.
Okay, so ultimately, every story comes down to one thing. If it doesn't have this thing, you could botch everything, but if you get this thing right, you'll do okay.
Okay.
and that's conflict. If you can get conflict right, the conflict within a scene, the conflict within the act, the conflict within the larger story, if that's clear and there's a clear struggle and you understand, you're able to communicate the emotions, but in the case of real life, you're able to understand the emotion, or rather clearly understand the conflict that the individual might be going through.
Every commercial, every...
Marketing 101, what's the problem that you're solving? But even deeper than that, what conflict is that causing in a person's life? What conflict is that problem solving or problem causing in the person's life? So if you can address the problem or solve the problem, you will remove the conflict from their existence. If you can do that, that's why Steve Jobs was really effective in what he did, because his whole thing was like user experience. How can we make it easier? How can we remove friction from the lives of people?
So the conflict was the difficulty of the user experience.
So there's a famous talk by Steve Jobs. If you want to look it up, look it up. But essentially what happens is he's giving a press conference for the release of some device. And one of the guys in the audience, he goes, such and such technology or programming language or whatever does all these great things. Why not just use that, right? What have you been doing for the last 7 years, right? He doesn't even address the guy directly, right? He goes like, you know what that guy is saying about technology being doing X, Y, and Z, I'm sure it does all that, right? I'm sure it does more than I know I can understand. It's like, but the issue is I'm trying to change the culture of a company. I'm trying to get them to understand that it's not that you cannot expect people to change their behavior for taking advantage of a technology. You need to understand what the behavior is and design the technology around that. Most people, they have a certain behavior, they're not going to be very flexible with that. And so if there's a technology that molds within their current patterns, it's going to flourish, right? And so in that way, that's why certain devices like Apple and like even like you got a Canon as a camera, right? That camera, there's certain things that it does very easily that you don't even have to worry about.
Autofocus.
Something as simple as autofocus, right? Is it the best camera? Absolutely not. It's going to shut off after 30 minutes, right? If you're recording, right? But Canon understands that people want to broadcast. They don't care about recording so much. So boom, they come out. They're the first out of all the companies to come out with an app that literally allows you to plug the camera into your device. And
Turn
boom,
it on and you're
good
on
to go.
Zoom. Yeah.
It might not be the highest resolution, but it works.
Yeah.
It's fitting within. Now for me, I'm trying to get the highest resolution, highest quality. I'm going to fiddle with it, right? But that's the key difference between people who understand the technology and will modify themselves to do it. But those are far and few in between.
So it's like the discussion about Android versus Apple.
Right.
Android people are usually more techy. They want to be able to modify their phones to do a million things.
But that's their behavior, right? That their behavior is the ability to fiddle.
Yeah.
Right? Apple, on the other hand, you give an apple to someone like myself, after 2 days, I returned it.
Yeah.
Because it was just like, I am being told. Now, granted, it's designed for the general population, for them to be able to use their apps. It's all there. You've got a left screen when you swipe all the way left, all your notifications and stuff are there. But I want to design it my way.
Yeah.
And it won't let me do that.
Yeah.
It was frustrating.
Okay.
Whereas Android is like an open canvas.
So when you say that everything boils down to conflict, that every story boils down to conflict. So
news media, simple example.
Okay.
Conflict grabs attention. And if that conflict is close to home, then people will pay attention.
Every khutbah should have conflict.
It's not about the khutbah having conflict. It's got to be something that's close to home. It's got to be something that is relevant.
It's relevance?
Yeah.
So it's not conflicts then, is it relevance?
No, it's everybody has conflict. A khutbah should address the conflict that people have. But addressing the conflict isn't so much about addressing the conflict. It's about first communicating that you understand the emotions that are coming within as a result or a consequence of the conflict.
Okay.
Right? So if an introvert tells me, "Oh, this is great, wonderful times." Why? Because I'm getting fit. Nobody's bothering me.
I don't have to attend a million functions.
Yeah. And that person's talking to me. I'm like, you and I can't be friends. Like, it's a completely different story for me.
Okay.
And this is the thing that if you understand, you're clear on what the conflict is, you understand the emotions the individual is going through. And this comes down to a fundamental principle of influence, which I'm sure you've heard of, is that you got to touch a person's heart before you can ask for their hand.
Okay.
One of the ways to touch a heart is to tell them that you understand what they're feeling by expressing an understanding of the conflict that they're facing. And though once you have that, boom, there's a connection. And you explain to them, hey, you know what? I have a solution for you. I know how you feel. I felt the same way. However, when I did X, Y, and Z, boom, the seas parted for me.
What do you see as far as our storytelling? I always like to say that we're an ummah that has, that is filled with heroes and no storytellers. So, you studied film on the side. What do you see as far as our scene from what you've seen of our film?
So if you talk about religious circles,
I'm speaking about film in particular, not necessarily educational institutions, but when we're talking about the art scene that we have going on.
Okay.
So the films, the storytelling, what do you see as far as?
Here's the thing. Within, the issue comes into play is when I think it goes back to the original question you had.
Have you seen Ertugral, by the way?
No. Oh, I tried watching a couple of episodes.
Okay. Because that's the one that everyone's raving about.
Everybody's raving about it. Every instance that I've seen, it just looks like a really bad soap opera.
Okay.
Right? And I'm gonna anger a lot of people here.
Yes.
Right? And even I asked, this thing is moving really slowly. When does
everybody says fast forward?
Well, everybody says fast forward, and everybody consistently says you need to watch 6 hours worth. And I'm like, that's an entire season for the stuff that's out there on Netflix and whatnot.
Yeah.
Right? In 6 hours, I can finish half an anime season. Right? And these are.
Do you watch anime, by the way?
I do.
I never knew that. I've never known that you were an anime watcher.
So I'm not an anime fan, but from the 90s and 2000s.
Are you counting Dragon Ball Z?
No. I mean, Dragon Ball Z, Cowboy Bebop was one of my favorites.
Never heard of it. Okay.
It's basically like a space western, right?
Okay.
In addition to that, one of the best presentations of anime artwork has to be, I loved Spirited Away. It's basically an anime Wizard of Oz.
Okay.
Right? In addition to that, the Animatrix, which was the story, it was a showcase of a story between the first Matrix movie and the follow-up Bad movies, right? But in the middle, they had Animatrix release.
They made an anime about the Matrix.
Well, it was a series of short anime films, right? Top directors within the space. Recently, I finished Samurai Champloo, which is from the person who created Cowboy Bebop. Psycho Pass is another great one. Now, I like anime that is more geared towards, I guess, a older audience.
Okay.
Right? My wife, on the other hand, likes that anime coupled with the stuff that's for kids. At least I look at it as for kids. She'd probably find it offensive if I said that.
I've only heard recently of The Last Airbender.
That's not even anime.
To me, I thought that was anime.
It's influenced and inspired by anime. But it's.
Is it in the anime genre? Is it considered to be in the anime genre?
No. Because anime specifically is...
Are you being an anime purist right now?
No, because anime specifically is from Japan.
Why? Why does it have to be from Japan?
Because that's what it is. This is anime.
That sounds pretty racist.
No, that's like saying Bollywood is...
So anime is a Japanese...
It's a Japanese thing.
Okay.
Right? You can have something that's an anime form or inspired by anime, but not anime itself.
Just because it's not from Japan?
It's not from Japan, yeah.
Okay.
All right, so Avatar: Last Airbender is Nickelodeon cartoon.
Okay.
right? That is inspired by the style of anime, but even in its style, it's not really anime.
So if it was produced not by Nickelodeon, but it was made by the Japanese equivalent, you would consider it anime.
Yeah, I mean, for example, like there's a series.
I'm just having trouble understanding how an art form is geographically restricted. If it's an art form, it's an art form. See what I'm saying? It's like, what separates Japanese anime from Chinese anime?
Part of it has to do with the genre of storytelling within it.
Okay.
Right? It's not just the aesthetic, right? Within Japanese anime, among the most common is something called Shounen, right? There's a number of specifics that go into it, such as a character who doesn't know his parents are a mystery. Not necessarily that they're orphaned, but their parents are a mystery. They go into some sort of educational thing and they rise from there. There's a bigger conflict that's addressing that school,
Okay.
As well as larger. There's some sort of fantastical element that's added in there, right? Like these are all elements that are part of like shonen genre within anime itself. But then there's also the style of art also plays a big part into it. Like there's a major facet of Avatar Airbender that is not anime. But
to be honest, I'm arguing with you and I have no idea. So it's very, very possible.
Okay. So yeah, Avatar technically is not anime. It's inspired by anime. They themselves say that we've taken influences from Japanese anime. And so, yeah.
So we were talking about amongst the Muslim community. So we went to Ertugral and things like that. Is there any particular...
I was throwing shade at Ertugral.
Yeah. So is there any particular films or manifestations of art?
So I'll say two, not specific movie, but director or studio that consistently produces excellent stories, right? Along with amazing spectacle.
Okay.
Right? Number one, Pixar.
Okay.
Right? Pixar, they have developed the science and process of storytelling to the degree where they know it's going to be a good movie and it's going to be a hit. Right? They understood it takes 12 years to write a good story. They figured, well, we can cut that down to a year by having 12 people work on it, you know, in a collaborative fashion with an individual leading that effort. Right?
So their teams are always 12 people.
Well, it's not always 12 people, but they understand that if they're trying to produce a film a year or every 2 years, they need a certain amount of people to make it work.
Okay.
Right? And that's coupled with the technical animation stuff that goes into it. The other is Christopher Nolan as a director and storyteller. This is the guy, he's an inspiration because he didn't go to film school. He's self-taught. Now, he's been making films and stuff as a kid, got his hands on a camera, but he understood that the foundation of him being able to make the films that he wanted to make had to be such that his stories had to be better than everybody else's.
So I know him from the Dark Knight trilogies.
Right, so that's what brought him to mainstream attention.
Okay.
Right? But if you can get your hands on one of his first films, which is The Following, his first feature film.
Sounds like a horror movie.
No, it's a story about a guy who's kind of like a private investigator. And it has that twist and it has that whole timeline stuff. It's all black and white and it was shot on weekends.
So my question for you is why Christopher Nolan? Why not, for example, Steven Spielberg? Why not, what's his name? The Avatar guy, James Cameron, right? Why him in particular when there are lots of blockbuster
Because these
directors?
guys, a big part about James Cameron is big on spectacle. Okay. Even Spielberg and Michael Bay and these guys, they're really big on spectacle.
Michael Bay, though, is known to be big on spectacle.
Right.
He's all about explosions and stuff like that.
Michael
but Steven
Bay
Spielberg
explosions.
is not, yeah.
But even Spielberg is also big on spectacle, but his whole thing is that let's have spectacle, but there needs to be a universal theme, right? Like his movie's got to be tied to something that everybody can relate to.
Okay.
Right?
That sounds pretty intelligent.
No, it definitely is intelligent. But to me, that's the only thing I can really take from him, right? As well as his note about understanding the emotional mechanics of what is happening specifically in the scene, like whatever you're seeing and whatever is being said and whatever you're hearing, how is that tied to triggering the emotional relevance of what you're trying to share, and does that resonate with the audience?
Is every scene purposeful? I mean, I guess every scene would have to be.
You would, yeah. No, if you're a narrative film where everything is manufactured, yeah, it's absolutely purposeful. Like, you know how much stuff gets left on the editing floor because
it's not moving the story forward.
It's not moving the story forward, exactly. Or it's slowing things down, right? And the third I would throw in there is the admiration of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? Of how one movie led to the birth of this entire first ever unprecedented.
What about the DC universe?
Ask anybody. That thing is a complete shambles.
Shaykh Saad Taslim. Shaykh Saad, which camera am I looking at? Did I say it again?
You can look at that. You can look at this one.
Yeah, we're going to look at all of them. Say that again. Tell us about the DC universe again.
There's a reason. So DC Universe, initially, Warner Brothers wanted Christopher Nolan to spearhead it. And Christopher Nolan was like, I don't want to. Right? Now, the problem with the DC Universe, or Extended Universe as you can call it, the challenge with it is that there's no one person at the helm of it. Kevin Feige and Jon Favreau, these are two guys who, Jon Favreau is the one who directed Iron Man, right? And the way that they approached it, they had a team of people write the character and the character story of Iron Man, and then they had another group of people write the plot of Iron Man. They brought them together, and
they had a group just writing about Tony Stark's.
Yeah, just who he is as an individual, his backstory, his character, his flaws, his struggles, his conflicts, just on a personal, emotional level.
Okay, so
right?
talk about character development. So all you know, and that's not even to say.
Yeah.
That's not even to say the script.
Yeah, that's not.
This is just let's get to know who this person is.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. This is fundamental in any story writing. Why? And this is something I gotta give credit to the scholars of the Islamic tradition, right? Is that before you start learning, at least on a traditional level, in my experience, whether it's the seerah or a book of hadith, right? It's important to take time out, even regular secular studies, always looking at the author.
Who is this person?
Who is this person? Before you read his book, before you read his work, what time did they live in? What were the major events happening during that time? And how might that have influenced the individual? And what was their biography on a basic level, right? Where were they born? How did they live? Who did they have around them? When we study the seerah before, like getting to know the Prophet ﷺ is the basic aspect. When you study a book of hadith, whether it's Imam Bukhari, Imam Nawawi, Imam Muslim, who are these individuals?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I feel like we do that less and less now. Yeah. Right? But that's a fundamental aspect of like before you get to study.
But that could also be due to our lack of ability to storytell.
But we do storytell. It's human ability to storytell.
I don't know, man, because for example, I remember
like our traditions have this whole thing about qasas, right?
Yeah. But this notion of storytelling, but for example, when you say we're doing it less and less, we're doing it less and less, but I don't know if we're doing it less and less because people are interested less and less.
No, because we're lazy. That's I'm plain and simple. I'm going to put it out there.
When you say lazy to do what? Lazy to tell those stories?
I will say that many people of knowledge don't want to take the time to craft the story to convey the information.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, is it due to the inability to story tell, not knowing these emotional mechanics and beats that you're talking about?
I don't think it's inability. Everybody has the ability. They just need to put in the work.
So just if I were to sit down with my laptop and open up and just to say, let me write the story of Imam Nawawi, for example.
Right.
I don't need to know any sort of skill sets or anything like that. Let me just write the story.
That's where you start. Now, the format in which you present it, that's where the technical skill comes into play.
Okay.
Right? So if you're going to present it as a narrative film, that's one method. If you're going to present it as a novel, that's
Well, here's an interesting thing. Let me ask you a question. We found in AlMaghrib that the hardest seminars to sell are the story-based seminars.
Such as?
Shadows in the Sun, the stories of the companions. Torchbearers, the stories of the scholars.
But look at what you did here.
What's that?
In both cases, you started with stories.
As opposed to story of one person?
Yes. Some of the most blockbuster stuff is the story of one person.
Like the story of Jibreel.
Story of Jibreel. The Seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Okay.
Right? Conquest. History of Khulafa.
That's stories.
Right, but still, it was the story of Abdullah bin Zubayr.
But nobody knew that walking in, right?
Nobody knew that walking in, but it was effective and people relayed that.
Okay.
Right? But even then, it was close enough proximity to the story.
So basically, the story of the four Khulafa was told through the eyes of Abdullah ibn Zubayr. He became the person through which you experienced all of those.
Yeah, he was the protagonist.
Okay.
The moment you go into like stories, it's like, who's the main character? Who should I be connecting to? Right? At least even in the case of His Majesty, right? Like at least in this case, you had two stories.
That's my course, by the way, on
Yes.
the names of Allah.
On the names of Allah. Even in that case, like there's a difference in how you present His Majesty, unlocking the names of Allah, and our interview series with the 99 names.
Yeah.
Right? In the 99 names, there's no story, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's the banter between two friends.
Yeah.
Whereas in His Majesty, people are tuning into the journey of an intense day of an individual focused on a day. It might have even been more effective if you told one person's story over 2 days.
Yeah. That could have been.
Yeah, I mean, but what I'm saying is the issue that comes into play is the hard sell seminars when you have stories.
So how would you tell stories then? That's the question. Because if you have a seminar,
Yeah.
you can't maybe necessarily devote an entire...
This goes back to the MCU model, right? Every movie is a character focus. Every movie is a character study.
Yeah, but for the purpose, like I can't teach an entire weekend seminar, for example, maybe on Al-Qurtubi, right? He's a session. I can't really tell an entire weekend story, for example, on Muhammad ibn Maslama, one of the companions. But, he's a session.
I like what Fahad Taslim has done.
Okay.
Right? Where he has a series for his kids, which then by extension happened to be something that he's produced for the kids of other people, A Year with the Prophet. But the whole thing is following a fictional character named Zayd. He's the hero of the story.
The evolution of fiqh, I remember, had faqih.
Ibn Hazm.
No, not Ibn Hazm. It had faqih. It had like a fictional faqih guy.
Well, there was a fictional faqih, but you were still going through the life of Ibn Hazm, and you would take breaks from his story to learn about the evolution of fiqh.
It's pretty good.
I mean, again, even if you got nothing out of it, you knew there was a guy named Ibn Hazm.
Yeah.
And this guy began his knowledge journey in his 40s and 50s, under the chandeliers, right? To say that he was rich and he had many opportunities.
And he still sought knowledge, yeah.
Yeah, and he still sought knowledge. I mean, that's the thing. Like, could you teach a class about Qurtub? Why couldn't you teach a full seminar?
You could, but I mean, it's one person versus multiple people.
But it comes down to this. You have a character. You as the writer. So there's two elements to every good story, regardless of the format that you're in. Element number one is the character. You as a writer knowing who this character is. Even if you're not going to showcase all of these elements, if you're not going to showcase where they were born, what their minute details are, right? For example, Tony Stark. The fact that his parents were murdered by the Winter Soldier. Like, that wasn't revealed until significantly later in the series of movies, right? Yeah. But these are all aspects that kind of are written into the life of Tony Stark that may or may not be revealed in the immediate story that you're telling. But you need that foundational work done. If it's a real person, you need to know that person inside and out.
Okay.
Right? And then there's the actual plot or the genre of the story, right? The plot and genre of the story is what will allow you to choose what aspect. This is where the conflicts come in, right? This is the environment, what's happening. When you know an individual, you know how they're going to react to the outside forces. Typical genres, it's like one of the most popular genres that will almost always make money is your monster in the house.
What's that?
It's essentially just that. There's some sort of being, creature, entity, or whatnot that's trying to kill you.
Okay.
In the space that you're in. whether that's a cabin in the woods or a spaceship in outer space or whatnot, or you're in a oil station deep underground. There's like these sharks trying to eat you.
Invading army.
Invading army is different, right? But there's a killer on the loose.
Okay.
Right? Freddy Krueger in your dreams.
Yeah.
Don't fall asleep. Or Jason with his hockey mask.
But why is the invading army different?
Because that's not horror. That's like invading army is not in your house.
Okay.
You're not in a confined space that you have to.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right? And so other genres like a road trip. Right? That's your, like Luke Skywalker, Star Wars. That's a road trip essentially. You're going on a journey, actual journey, only to find that the movie, the Star Wars original, like starts with on Tatooine, on that desert planet, with that hut with the one sun rising, one sun setting, or both setting, whatever. And then the entire series ends with the new Star Wars movies. They end on Tatooine, where she takes Luke Skywalker's saber and she buries it. Right? Like it always comes back to where the story started.
Okay.
That's what they mean by a road trip. You also have the stories of like a regular dude in an extraordinary situation. Basically a dude with a problem. Most famous example of this is Die Hard.
Okay.
Right? Bruce Willis, regular guy, he's a police officer, went to go see his wife, and these terrorists take over, these German guys take over the office building. Wow.
Terrorists were German in
the
80s?
Time.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a Christmas movie. And that formula has been used so many times.
Okay.
Right? This is a regular dude or regular gal, dudette, in an extraordinary situation. How would you? And it's something that resonates because we're all regular people.
And then you might be the hero one day.
Yeah, right. But like if they can get over their problem, here's a person, regular dude. They have flaws. They're not always like perfect.
Stanley Ipkiss, The Mask.
Yeah.
Regular guy.
Right? Regular guy.
Mask.
But his thing is his genre is different. His genre is the Make-A-Wish.
How many genres are there?
There's typically around 8.
Okay.
Right? This is Make-A-Wish kind of. Aladdin, The Mask, like these are all basically the same movie. There's something that comes about that gives them everything that they ever wanted.
Okay.
Right? Stanley Ipkiss, shy guy, not confident, doesn't have much going for him, and The Mask comes on and makes him like an amazing dancer, and everybody's like, he's fun and crazy and all of that.
Yeah.
Aladdin goes from being a street rat to a prince. Right? You also have extraordinary individuals, nearly perfect, but they're being dragged down by the jealousies and agendas of those around them. Your Superman story, your prophet story. You have the institutionalized, where there may not be a good guy or a bad guy, but you're seeking a character, a regular human being that has to navigate the pros and cons of different institutions. The pros and cons of family versus government. The pros and cons of gang life versus, law enforcement. The pros and cons of being in a restrictive high school.
I see what you're saying.
Then
a lot of movies like that.
Yeah, a lot of movies. There's also the genre of, again, not necessarily a good guy or bad guy, same kind of idea, but instead of institution, it's about things that we cannot control. Dealing with death, dealing with cancer, right? It's that whole like what are you gonna do, right? And the effect that it has on an individual and the journey that they have to take on an emotional level within the context of what's happening around them because of something that they couldn't control.
And all of these, of course, at the center of all of this is an incredible conflict.
Well, yeah, the conflict, exactly. There's a conflict that's forcing them to be uncomfortable. There's also the rite of passage, right? The rite of passage could be something like coming of age, something that transitions an individual from being a child to an adult, right? Or it could be something like a midlife crisis type of story. It could be getting married or getting divorced kind of story. Like these are all rite of passages that everybody, like generally speaking, getting your driver's license, graduating from college, getting married, getting divorced, having a child, these are all, there's amazing stories there. Because these are human experiences that when you experience them, it is a rite of passage. You've kind of transitioned into a form of a different social class even. when you transition through these paths. There's several of these kinds of genres. This is a question of like when you have a character. And this is what made Christopher Nolan very good. Even in the Dark Knight trilogy, it's not really a trilogy.
It's all one movie.
No, they're not even all
That's
one
what
movie.
I thought you were going to say.
Right? So Batman...
It's not even that it's a trilogy. It's all one movie.
No, they're minus The Dark Knight Rises. So The Dark Knight Rises deliberately is not standalone because he just wanted to tie it up so he doesn't have to come back to it.
Okay.
Right? But you can watch The Dark Knight
and be done.
You can watch Batman Begins and be done. You can watch them together and be done. Right? The thing is, the Batman Begins is an origin story. The Dark Knight is a crime drama, cops and robbers. It just happens to be Batman and Two-Face and Joker. The Dark Knight Rises is a disaster epic, right? The kind of things that happen when things are like out of your control. A disaster movie, comets coming down, there's a tsunamis happening. There's always a disaster movie happening.
So what, Bane is the disaster?
In a way, he comes in just like this storm, right?
Like Thanos.
In a way, right?
Like LeBron James to the Raptors.
Going back to the Marvel Cinematic Universe example, what made Infinity War brilliant was that was Thanos' story. He's the main character.
How is he the main character?
It opens with him.
Okay.
Every step of the way, it's him trying to achieve a goal and everybody's trying to stop him from it. And that goal is to bring balance to the universe. It's funny though, because a friend of mine was just like, you know he's a bad guy, but he's not the antagonist of the story. The Avengers are the antagonist.
What does antagonist mean? Antagonist
is another word for the bad guy.
They're the bad guy? Because they're trying to stop him from his goal?
Yes. Because every character is a hero in their own story. And because Infinity War is Thanos' story, the Avengers are the antagonists. They're antagonizing him.
Well, yeah, if you look at any bad guy, if they're the hero of their story, then anybody who's trying to stop them is their bad guy.
It opens with him. He's kind of like, you could even argue that it would be a dual story between Thanos and Thor because they're in the opening scene. But in the end, when it comes down to the final face-off, Thor throwing the axe at him, and then Thanos snapping his fingers, Thanos wins. Right? And that's why it worked really well. My buddy was like saying, like, wow, he's a bad guy. And he's like, he's winning, and he's winning, and he's winning, and he wins some more. And the whole time you're kind of feeling like, hey, you know what? This guy kind of makes some sense.
Yeah, I've noticed that with bad guys recently. Like even with Killmonger from Black Panther.
Yeah.
Like it's not like we're not going with the clear-cut bad guys anymore. They're becoming murky. They're becoming, the heroes are becoming anti-heroes and the bad guys are becoming whatever you want to call it.
Anti-villains?
Anti-villains. And I think it's to some degree reflective of how society is moving in the direction of
complexity.
But that's what you want to call it, complexity. But complexity everyone's got their own truth and nobody is really ever wrong, right?
But the thing that I appreciate about Black Panther and in the story of Killmonger and T'Challa, you already know who T'Challa is.
He's a hero.
No, you know he's the king of Wakanda, he's this guy, and so on. But you don't know who Killmonger is. What's his childhood? And that's what you get. The scene opens up with him as a kid. You don't know it's him as a kid. What you see is King T'Chaka, Black Panther's dad, killing his brother. Right? Royal feud for whatever
complexity.
Reason. There's complexity. Things aren't always, there's disagreement. And that disagreement gets escalated to violence, and that violence ends with somebody dying. And that death affects someone. And now it's a question of, is vengeance justified? Is the path that you take for vengeance appropriate? This is what The Falcon of Spain is about. Because the story opens up with a real life story about a Abbasid prince, very low level prince, nobody really knows or cares about him. But when the, not Abbasid prince, an Umayyad prince, when the Abbasid revolution happens, they're basically killing off all of the Umayyad royalty to remove any potential heirs to rulership. Now, this guy escapes, but his whole thing, like, even in his escape...
Who's this guy?
Abdurrahman bin Muawiyah, aka Saqr Quraysh, which other folks called him the Falcon of Spain because he ends up reigniting.
He was called the Falcon of Quraysh, and then he becomes
but
the Falcon
he ended
of Spain.
up having his rulership in Al-Andalus, which is modern day Spain. And so, like they even killed his own brother in front of him. Right? His whole thing was, I'm going to get vengeance. I'm going to go back and destroy these people. Right? Like that's his whole story. But if you look at it from a perspective of like the whole struggle from within him is a question of like, he ends up having to choose, do I let go of the justice that I'm working to establish just so I can fulfill my desire for revenge?
Yeah.
Right? It makes for a great, that's another story, is that redemption story, a redemption arc. Like many situations, like it's also this iconic trope, the Mandalorian, right? Which is a Star Wars thing on Disney Plus. You have a really assassin, doesn't take anything from anyone, and is assigned to protect a child. Where have you seen that before?
Assigned to protect a child. I've seen that in Man on Fire.
Okay, sure, Man on Fire. Give me another.
I don't know.
Terminator 2.
I never watched Terminator.
Oh my God, come on, dude.
I haven't, I'm sorry, man.
Okay, Road to Perdition, the Tom Hanks movie, right? I mean, it's a common trope,
Okay.
right? This whole idea of like, here's a dude, very skillful, doesn't take anything from anyone. In fact, might even be the bad guy. Many cases is, but he has to become good to fulfill his mission. Terminator in the first movie was the bad guy. Went after, a robot trying to kill Sarah Connor. Mandalorian, he's a bounty hunter, right? Like, he'll kill anyone and everyone that gets in his way.
Yeah.
Right? But the moment it's like, all right, here's a child. Like, I thought this was going to be a regular bounty. He ends up having to spend the entire season protecting this kid. The thing that we lack is our people putting in the time and effort to design the story. It takes work. It's already challenging enough to design a curriculum and put together a presentation that would be easily teachable within a particular structure. But what's far more effective always is a good story. And that story...
to be honest, even with my His Majesty course, it was one thing for me to do all of the research and then, just get the names of Allah right, get it all factually correct, all of the gems that I want, all of the points that I want to make. And I could have just finished the seminar there.
Yeah.
And then you suggested to me, tell it in the form of a story.
Yeah.
And that did take the experience to another level because people were able to connect with the two characters that I presented in the seminar, Jamal and Isa.
Yeah.
They saw themselves in these individuals.
No doubt. And I just remember even during the recording when you told the twist at the end.
Yeah, people
right?
were like,
people like, yeah,
Exciting, man. So these are just a little bit of a sample of Belal and I when we get together in the randomness, alhamdulillah. We haven't gotten to the tea and monkey-grown oolong tea and all of the other things. But I really appreciate you taking the time today and coming over.
This episode is going to be visually different than...
Belal came and set up all his cameras and the lights and he was just so excited to meet another human being while
that I was willing to
under quarantine. He was like, "When do you want me to come over? Come over right now." But continue to make dua. If you've been making dua and you kind of fell off making dua that COVID be lifted, make sure that you continue to do so because some people out here really need it. Okay, they really need it. Jazakallah khair, man. Always appreciate you joining us and spending some time with us. Lastly, what projects are you working on and where can people reach out to you?
Sure. We talked about Falcon of Spain, but I think the key thing right now is if y'all want to hit me up on YouTube, just you can either search for Chrome Dome Marketing. Essentially, the channel is featuring yours truly, marketing by profession, media by passion. My whole objective with that channel is basically to help people make their ideas real using digital media. So if you have any questions about being able to tell your story, being able to get your stuff out there, technicalities with gear and things like that. What's the best camera to use? All of that, right? My my hope is to help folks.
As everybody's, kind of rush to,
especially with
Corona, rushing to Zoom and recording and uploading, and even myself, I've had to message some of my friends who are imams and things like that, like, you need to use a microphone when you record video.
Simple stuff, man. It's just like, you got a phone, okay, you're recording like this, but like, getting a microphone just essentially, like, if you can have horrible video, right, shaky footage, poorly lit, but if your audio is clean, it's all good. Yeah. Because then you can repurpose that. Yeah. In some form or another.
So Belal, one thing I will say is that you're always very generous with your knowledge. So when you reach out to Belal, message him, feel free to definitely contact him. And he might send you a 25-minute video response. Or in my case, a 25-minute voice note. But you know what I mean?
Or a video on how to do squats and stuff.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, there's also the Strength Dojo for all of the fitness and martial arts.
So that's another YouTube channel, Strength Dojo.
Strength Dojo, exactly.
Great.
And but yeah, I mean, this basically, they're basically taking two major facets of my life, which have nothing to do with each other. Yeah. So I just kind of made their own channels there.
MashaAllah. Jazakallah khair, my man. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.